Town of Southington Board of Finance meeting. We'll stand for our Pledge of Allegiance. Okay. Our roll call, please. That's you.
Oh, that's me?
Yeah, I'll give you. We'll brief you after the roll call.
I've been promoted. Thank you. All right. Let's see. I'm just going to start there.
Right on the they go off the right on the top of the paper.
I'll go backwards. Okay. Susan Zoni.
Here.
Tony Morrison.
Here.
Kevin Bodwin.
Here.
Edward Pocock Jr.
Here.
Joseph Labiniak.
Absent.
Chairman John Leary.
Here.
I guess we have a quorum.
All right. Thank you. So we have no public hearing items. And before we get into old business, I'd like to welcome Jim Bowes here as our finance director. So the record notes it that Amelia Portahena has retired, and she will be helping us on a consulting basis to make sure we wanted to make sure there was a smooth transition in finance. So she'll be helping us with any open matters and work that she started as Jim takes over 100%. Jim has been the former finance director for the town of Southington many years ago, then left for a career in Wallingford, and now has come back. This is his hometown as well. So come back, be closer to home, and provide the service for us. So we welcome Jim back. Jim has also been an elected official or a sitting member of the Board of Finance. So he's been on this side of the table, that side of the table, and he's kept close on the finances of Southington as a resident, and sometimes he offered opinions and advice to Amelia and others in the finance realm as they shared ideas on what they're doing in all their towns. So we're happy and pleased to have Jim back with us. So Jim, thank you. So how we do these meetings quickly, you could see from the agenda, and if you have any ideas, let us know. A while back, we made some reforms and transformed the way we run the meetings, but we haven't done that in a while. So if you have anything that you see or something you've seen done somewhere else that makes sense, tell us.
Sure.
But one thing we added was assessing the current state of the town. A long while ago, that wasn't part of the agenda. That was done either privately or one-on-one, but we brought it to the forefront. So we talk about our revenues versus our budget. We talk about expenses versus the budget. We talk about our capital projects, where we are with those, and that's something new, just so that we know, like when a patient goes in to see the doctor, they do some basic things, and that's what we do here. We don't get into everything, but we want to know where we are with our expenses, where we are with our revenue. If there's any surprises, we don't want them to be. So anything that comes up in conversation is good. That whole conversation concludes in whether we're ahead or behind, whether we're projecting a surplus or a deficit, and whether that surplus it's always a surplus. Whether that surplus, thank God, whether that, and the Board of Finance, whether that surplus is driven from revenue being more than budget, or whether that surplus is driven from expenses being less than budget, we like to know, because it gauges us. And then we get into what was always the regular business, which would be subcommittee reports, and we put the emphasis on finance. You could come up and talk about like public works and talk about what road's getting paved or what grade the road is. That's not so much important. What's important is the finance implications of it. So that's what we like to hear here. Unless there's something we want to reinforce the message, because people do watch these and stream these meetings. If we want to mention the leaf pickup or some of the every now and then we mention something that would be informative to the folks who watch us. And then we get into these liaison reports. So we don't have in an official capacity, we don't have a committee on it, but we've made our own investment committee when we hired the treasurer and decided to take our excess funds and invest them. We set up a little investment committee to look after that. That came from Mr. Bedoyan a long time ago, and that was a whole well worth it endeavor, because we have made money on our investments, even in the limited all the restrictions placed on how we could invest them. But we have done well there, and it's good to do that, because we do have excess funds. The rainy day fund is full. We also had liaisons to the Board of Fire Commissioners. We kept that in place It all started with some concerns over overtime and wanting to have a closer relationship with the board. So Mr. Bedoyan and Mr. Pocock go when they can and liaise with the Board of Fire Commissioners. And we kept it in place because of the study that was done. There's a fire study that's done, and there's recommendations in the study. And as those roll out, it's just good. Every recommendation is likely to cost money. And we'd like to know what's going on there. And then any other committees anybody went to. Then the general board communications. We have public communications where anybody from the public could communicate with us, and we'll listen to them. And then we have a long-range plan and priorities section where we talk about anything strategic related. Usually comes from the town manager, from something we wanted to bring up on this board that we want to spend some time talking about. So we made it a standing agenda item. Then we get in the consent agenda. The first part of it, as you know, are all these appropriations. This is basically where the town has received money. So we have the check or the cash, and we have to just appropriate it back to the line item that needs it. So, for example, the fire truck that was in an accident, somebody's going to give us roughly $10,000, and we're just going to appropriate it back to the proper line in the proper department so that they can pay for the repairs. And then the manager memos are other appropriations and transfers, as you know. And then if something else were to come up, like this Board of Ed non-lapsing account comes up, we put it on. And under FOIA, we can't just add things to the agenda. That would create a special meeting, so we'd like to have these openings in here that give us some flexibility. That's it. If anybody else has any, opening thoughts for Jim as he starts. All right, all set.
Jim's an expert anyway.
Jim's an expert.
Oh, no such thing as experts in municipal finance. If anyone tells you, run the other direction. Thank you, folks. If there's anything that you need to see on an agenda or comments or something that's not getting to you, let me know. We'll
Okay.
we'll
And
correct.
again, if
we'll
you have
correct.
any wisdom or something that you've normally provided, and you say, boy, I don't provide that in Southington, it was very useful,
Yeah.
let us know.
Will do.
So we want to do now the approval of the minutes of the July 27th meeting. Do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mr. Pocock, second by Mrs. Zoni. Any corrections, adjustments to those minutes? All those in favor, state by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that'll carry 5-0. Now we'll get into assessing the current financial state of the town. So that's to you, Jim, on revenues versus budget, and then on expenses versus budget.
Yeah, the focus right now, since we're only a couple of months into the fiscal year and just having a week or so to kind of take a look at some of the status as to where we are, more frankly, July 31st rather than August 31st, because it takes a couple weeks just to try to close things down every month. But expenditure-wise, obviously very early in the year, so there's nothing out there yet. And even through August, Amelia and I were looking at a few things this morning, and there's nothing out there that really alarms us yet at this point in time. Obviously, as we proceed on, that obviously will change, and we'll bring it to your attention. On the revenue side, I think we just put together a quick little summary for you that I handed you tonight, which is showing a little bit of the major, I'll call them the major revenue drivers in the general fund budget and where their status was thus far. So you can see prior year taxes, interest on taxes, building permits and fees, and interest and town clerk's fees, and the Kerma equity payments. In the prior year taxes, you might be aware, I'm sure you're aware, that the town has had a tax sale of certain properties. That generated a lot of interest from people who own these properties who did not want to have their properties up for sale. So some of those folks motored in and got some payments done, which is the primary reason behind most of that reason, that amount that you're seeing on the spreadsheet. The second, interest on taxes, the same explanation. Again, quite a few. I think I have a summary of how many. 27 properties were advertised to go for sale. I'll use that term. And 7 actually went out for sale, which means 20 property owners settled up. And of course, those are past due, so that generates the interest on those taxes at 18% per year to increase as well.
It's not what we want, but it's nice that it all settles with us. We
Sure.
like people to pay tax on time and the right amount.
Sure.
We would have liked all 27, but
Yeah.
it didn't work out.
Yeah.
So.
Right. And it's
and I
sad
don't-
when we ever have to
Yeah.
foreclose and sell.
Yeah.
We're in
that's
favor of redeeming. When
Yeah.
people redeem, that's good.
yeah, that is very good news. The third item being permits and fees, building permits. As you know, there has been a bit of a building boom going on. Some of this is residential, some of this is commercial. Some of the expansions that you've, from the economic strike force, I'm sure you're aware, or maybe will be made aware tonight. We don't know what the effect is. I'm not an economist. I don't play one on TV. I don't pretend to be one. But something tells me, something that Mr. Bodwin mentioned before with regards to interest rates going up. I mean, are we going to see some type of slowdown in certain aspects of building? I think at the local government side, I think you've got to be very cautious as to how you proceed and project out your revenues or your variances, especially when you're only 2 months into the fiscal year. But so far, so good is what I think the news is on that line item. Same thing with interest on investments. Interest rates ticked up. They're always slower to tick up on the interest income side than they are on the borrowing side. And I don't say that in jest or to be jocular. It's just the way it happens. It takes a little while for it to filter through to some of the investments. And as you folks have probably been well brought up to speed in the past, there's only certain things that municipalities by state statute can invest in to begin with. So, I mean, you're kind of restricted to very, and for good reason. That's not a criticism. You don't want stuff with widely swinging net asset values and stuff in your investment, your operating cash portfolio. There's no need for that stuff in general fund type of monies. The town clerk fees is very. We asked the folks on the clerks if they could just give me just a quick and skinny on some of that. Because of the large volume of property sales generating tremendous conveyance fees or conveyance taxes, sometimes they're called, revenue. But just in summary, for the first 2 months of the fiscal year, there was 153 warranty deeds filed with the town clerk's office. And so what they did for us, they did a really nice job, and I thank the folks, Kathy and Sandy down there. There were 32 sales of $500,000 or more in the first 2 months of the fiscal year. Now, some of that obviously has to do with the appreciation in market value, as we all know. I mean, I'm not going to belabor the point. But we also had some big hitters like Executive Boulevard Properties, $18 million and change. That's probably the largest one on here. And believe it or not, a couple of houses that have sold for $1 million, believe it or not. So, we'll, yeah, Eddie Pocock's house, no. But in all seriousness, you take this as good news. You take it and run and just leave it there for the time being because we don't know what's going to happen, especially if rates continue to go up. People ask me all the time, what are rates going to do? I don't get involved in predicting.
Yeah, we certainly don't want any speculation in our revenue budget.
Yeah, we don't. I do not speculate on that. Mark and I have had a brief conversation about that already, and Amelia worked for me for 4 years when I was here, and we traded so many phone calls and texts and emails over the last 17, 18 years that it's and with a pool of other folks in this general area who are great at what they do, just to sharing your thoughts, you know what I mean? And not to say that you're going to do the same thing here that Cheshire would do or Plainville or something, but just to see what if they're hearing anything that maybe one other person isn't. Especially the last 2 years with COVID, as most professional groups have had kind of a bit of a breakdown in some of these meetings where you get a lot of professional assistance. My group has just started to meet, and if you're not meeting live, yet we were doing the Zoom meetings or GoToMeeting.gov or whatever it was, and for our professional group. But you're really missing something when you don't have that networking that happens in between educational sessions, or even maybe a little bit of a finger food and happy hour for a half an hour or so after the event. That's where you're really getting a lot of information from other professionals in your group. So, but we'll take that as it is right now. And last but not least is the Kerma equity payment, which is basically a repayment by Kerma for better than expected experience in our workers' compensation lap pool. So that exceeded the budget by about $70,000 so far in the first 2 months, and that's probably going to stay that way.
That won't change.
Yeah, that's not going to
Won't
change
go
because I think it happens once a year, if I remember correctly. Mark confirmed that with me with some, but still, hey, again,
We'll take it.
it's one revenue line item. It's a relatively small line item, and we've got a $71,000 surplus in that line item. You take it and you run to the bank with it. You know?
So all in all, rough rounded numbers, we're about 650,000 ahead because of
Cor-
these revenue items
Correct.
in the year.
Correct. And again, if rates like
But that's a good buffer.
that's
Buffer right there.
that's a buffer in case things start to get a little bit dicey in the fall with
We
maybe.
talked about inflation being one of the biggest threats to what we do. And we know we're locked in for some utilities, we're locked in for fuel.
Yeah.
But some of those will expire and we'll have to rethink whether we lock in or not. So that's
So the only, one of the benefits with higher interest rates, which the Fed is expected to raise interest rates by 70 basis points next Wednesday, that's almost a given, is on the investment side. But you correct me if I'm wrong. Our current, I don't have our investment portfolio, our current portfolio, the rates that we currently have on whatever, the bonds or the notes or the T-bills, those are locked in until they mature.
That's correct.
So once they mature, this increase that the Fed's doing with the interest rates will benefit because then we can reinvest at a higher rate. So,
Yeah.
But that's the investment side.
That's the
That's the
MBS
good
product,
part.
the
That's it.
multi-bank
Yeah. Yep.
services product. Yeah, they hold those investments.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of them are. Well, first of all, most of their portfolio is invested in bank CDs throughout the country.
Right.
Up with a maximum of $250,000, which is your FDIC insurance limit. Then the remaining of that portfolio, I'd say probably maybe 20%, give or take 25. I just started looking at these reports a couple of days ago. Looks like they're invested, like you said, in federally government-backed
Right.
bonds, whether they're treasuries, whether they're Fannie Mae's and things of that nature. And the intent of that company is to hold them to avoid the fluctuation or potential fluctuation in net asset value. Not that they swing wildly to begin with, but if you hold to maturity, which is the intention, you're going to get everything that you.
Right.
When you're redeeming, and this company goes back into the market for their municipal clients throughout the country, they'll be coming in at resetting at a higher rate.
Yeah. Oh, can I ask you a favor? Amelia usually sends me those portfolios. Is it monthly or quarterly you get them? Monthly?
I believe she told me quarterly, but she's been talking to me a lot the
Could
last
be
2 weeks. So,
Because
yeah.
she'll send me, and that's when I do the little update when
That's
I'm
what
on
she
the
said,
investment committee,
yeah.
So,
Okay, so that would be for the
In the
October
future.
meeting.
yeah, I use those just to give people updates on, like
Yeah.
you just said, with the overall current interest rates that our portfolio,
Yeah.
is at. And
Yep. Yeah, it's the MBS financial statement that comes,
Yep.
and I believe she told me she sends it to you quarterly. And if she sends it, and Amelia's going to be with us, and probably like Chairman John has said, phasing out a little over time as because she really wants to retire, to be honest with you, and but she's very, very dedicated to the community and to you folks. Frankly, I told her I think she spoils you the way she does these agendas, but
Yeah, she did
I'll-
great.
I'll-
She
I'll-
did a great
go that
job.
far.
that's all right. I'll work overtime and take care of it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
This information?
No, I've known Amelia even before I hired her here as my deputy, back when she worked for the town of Cheshire, when I was in public accounting, another lifetime ago, maybe 2 lifetimes ago, but she's been a professional in every sense of the word. So. And if there's anything else that you folks, like I said, would like to see, please send me an email, give me a call, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, I think we're good there. Thank you. Anything on capital projects? Sometimes we wait to talk to them on the quarters.
Yeah, that's what she also communicated to me, is that that's usually a
Okay.
quarterly update, so we will have that to you for your October meeting.
Okay, let's go to the subcommittee reports. Sewer Committee, Mr. Morrison?
Sure, okay. We've had 2 meetings. The second meeting didn't take place because it was just business as usual, and there was discuss even. So, but anyway, the items from the last couple of months, and again, only doing financial stuff. Everything's pretty much on track. Various things, the plant upgrades, the lining rehabilitation, the Plantsville and the West Queen pump stations. But financial things, first is on the Plantsville pump station. We gave the contract to demolish the station to Stanford Wrecking Company, and they're going to start that work in 2 weeks. Secondly, we gave a contract out for 3D manhole inspection work. The reason for this was because it's been found that material has been falling into manholes, and Mr. Williams, plant superintendent, specifically mentioned the Sunset Ridge area. And that was a contract was awarded Duke's Root Control in an amount of $41,120, and it will be funded from the sewer maintenance account. And that's obviously already gone to the town council and been voted on. Third thing was a change order for contaminated soil removal that was found at West Queen Street Pump Station. That was only $14,000. So, otherwise, that's it. Sewer Committee.
Thank you. Any discussion about looking at the sewer fund and reducing the rates, the usage rates? Or?
I'm sort of pushing that. I wasn't at that at the meetings. I had COVID, so
Gotcha.
so I'll bring it up at our next meeting.
Okay, Public Works Committee, Mr. Pocock and Mrs. Zoni.
Okay. And a program. That drives over every street in town and determines the condition of the roads so that we can better prioritize what treatment and two pavilions have been built and completed at Memorial Park by the playground, one between the concessions. Those were done ahead of schedule. There were many people, apparently, that showed up at the Parks Board meeting, which almost never happened, because they wanted pickleball courts. So they will be getting 6 pickleball courts in place of one of the tennis courts. I'm sorry, 2 of the tennis courts at Panthorn Park, and 2 tennis courts will remain. We will have public pickleball courts. The trail, the walking trail. We all know that there's a section that has not been completed. That section has now been divided into 2 pieces because we've had difficulties in state and landowners. So part that goes from Lazy Lane to Aircraft Road has been given a project number and is hoped to bid on in November. Phase 2, which is the second part, has difficulties, so that we have no kind of time setting for. The other thing that has come to my attention, I've gotten a few calls and I've seen some things online about, was the tree cutting on the. So just so everybody understands, the tree that was cut down, that was our Christmas tree, was not just done frivolously. That tree, as well as many in the parks, as I've been told, were checked by tree maintenance people. They were methods were tried to keep those trees alive, and the methods have failed. So that tree on the green that was our Christmas tree had to come down because it was dead, and it had to come down for safety reasons. There are trees in some of the parks that will also have to come down for the same reasons. We tried to save them, but couldn't. I mean, sometimes CPR just doesn't work. So there are other trees that will be coming down. On the green, the Christmas tree will be replaced, but with a smaller tree. It's probably about 16 feet. A reasonable size tree to replace the ground with the soil conditions we have and the tree root condition of the tree. It won't go in until after the Apple Festival, but it will be there in time for the lighting celebration. Oh, one other thing. Safe Street grants. There were some people on the Public Works Committee who wanted us to apply for Safe Street and Roads grants. There were a zillion hoops to step through, and timing was of the essence. The grants amounted to quite a lot of money, but all preliminary work had to be completed before the grant. Not a sufficient amount of time to get that done.
Thank you. Any questions? Open space, Mr. Pocock?
We've been working on a lot of areas that big purchases done is Bird Street.
We just purchased that on Monday with the council.
Yep, just finished. It's where the entrance goes in to Bird Street Park,
Oh, to
Panthorn Park.
Pathorn Park.
On the right,
Yeah,
left,
right.
or both sides?
Called Bird Street
Yeah, it
Park.
used to be. We worked out, the house has been picked out of that area, the owners still have that. But this is right up against right side. Nice area that can be.
Self-insurance?
We didn't meet for self-insurance since our last Board of Finance meeting, but the one update I do have is we do have the claims for July, and the actual claims came in line with our budget amount, basically a difference of $73,000 on a budget amount of $2 million, so that's pretty good,
Pretty flat.
basically flat, which is a good.
Economic strike, Mr. Morrison?
Okay, a couple of things. The first is kind of a laundry list of projects that are going on for development. I won't go into all of them, but there's still quite a lot of activity, which bodes well for the tax rolls. One of the interesting ones was building on Executive Boulevard, which I haven't been over to see, but apparently it just sold for $18 million. Which is an incredibly high amount for that property. But there's an explanation behind it. Lou said it was a New York investment company is looking to do some stuff with it. But that certainly bodes well, but I think it may be a one-time accident. There's the Beaton and Corbin property is finally going to be developed. There's a release of light supposed to come through. I don't know if it's come through.
I have a copy of it with you.
Lovely will be taking over the liabilities for remaining invoices, and they expect to start building with occupancy in the spring, which means one, not just financial impact of the town, but an eyesore has been removed at long last, which is pretty amazing. Those are a couple of major items. I won't go in the whole list. The second thing was we talked about an industrial infrastructure improvement tax abatement. And the idea is to spur development for industrial areas in town. And the idea was brought forward was for 100% tax abatement for 5 years. The purpose of municipal, industrial, road and infrastructure improvements performed by a private entity or related entities. The reason for this is that we've had somewhat bad luck of developing industrial properties purely because of cost. And the thing is, industrial properties are our highest taxpayers. It's something that we really do need. So the idea was to bring this forward and send it to the town council. The Economic Strike Committee approved it in the sense of making a favourable recommendation, but we don't have approval. It's up to the town council. But we all thought it was a great idea because, at least with tax abatements, you're not giving away taxes. You're not giving away money. You're essentially saying we're not going to collect money that's due from the development of a property for a certain while, and then, of course, we will. So we thought it was a good solution to an admitted problem that we have right now. And as I said, it will be discussed at the town council in more detail. I don't know, Mark, if you've got anything to
No,
add?
it's actually on the next council agenda,
Oh, it
scheduled
is.
for public hearing.
Okay.
But I very much in favor of it. Mr. Perillo and I had a similar one many years ago, where it enables a third party to build infrastructure, which we turned over to the town without the issues. So in this particular case, favor of, but as you mentioned, scheduled for public hearing, hear the public, and then vote on it.
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? I just have one question. Do we have a list of the properties in town that are for either under tax abatement or not subject to tax exempt, either like something like a church or a church property?
We have that through the assessor's office.
We all get a copy of that
Absolutely.
at some point. No rush on it, but just to see, what properties they are, who's under abatement or under some form of.
People who are non-taxable and also ones under abatement. That's just real estate.
Okay. Any other committee reports, like investment committee? We know we don't have the report yet, right?
No, but I have nothing more to add than Jim's good
Yeah.
explanation on town's main revenue variances and the town's investment portfolio that he described earlier.
Anything from the Board of Fire Commissioners? Mr. Pocock, Mr. Bedoin?
The only thing I have is Chief.
Paul retired. He was knowledge tomorrow night. The Board of Fire Commissioners will be appointed.
Kevin, you don't have any?
No, that's a big loss.
That's-
Yeah.
He was a very good chief. Yep.
Round up, absolutely.
Started out.
Okay, any other committee reports? Anybody attend any other committees? Any board communications? Members of the board would like to speak on a topic?
Just quickly, I think coincidentally, three of us on the board all met at a special meeting at the town council because we're all interested in the library, myself, Ed and Kevin. And it was a certain matter about the library. But I think the reason we're all interested is purely because of the financial stuff. Because of the increase in prices and materials, we won't be able to build the library that we thought we'd build doing the 16.9 million referendum. So there's been a lot of discussion, about what we should be doing and how we should be doing it. I think it's probably. I think we should talk to the town council, Mr. Chairman, just about when it would be appropriate for the Board of Finance to be involved, because it was mentioned several times during the meeting that would be appropriate at some point. So I was going to ask if you could chat to Madam Chair to
Yep.
ask her when is that appropriate time.
I will ask. I do believe when finance things of that nature are being reworked, that it should come back for the guidance of the board. If it should come back, we would look at all the aspects, including today's cost of financing, and kind of bring everything together again and relook. Which only, the town council could probably do it too, but this board, cost of financing and the whole thing. But I will ask if it's coming our way.
It'll probably be after the 28th, as I mentioned prior. committee is meeting on the and at that point, probably we'll report back. Or move forward with it.
You don't break ground, so, and that, until around
Yeah, we're-
May, you're saying? If
We're
it
not
goes
even
forward?
we're not even designed yet.
Right.
We have minimal designing. So what happens is the goal would be you go through full design, and if at the quickest you talk about going out to bid sometime in the spring.
So when you're talking about prices, like, we can only get 24,000 square feet for 17,000. The price factor is not to when you go out to bid, and inflation could be,
I can only tell you that
no one knows what inflation
No,
would be.
I can only
but
tell
it
you
may
what
be
the
down.
people, the estimators who work for the construction manager.
Yep.
I'm assuming they're looking at what all we look at, but to answer your question, no one has a crystal ball, so they're going to estimate what it's going to be upon probably next summer costs.
Okay. So shouldn't panic on what it is right now, because
Correct.
things can change a lot in the next.
Because they're not
They
looking
will
at it right
change
now.
a lot in the
Yeah, they're not
6
looking at
months.
right now. They're looking at after we
Right.
go out to bid.
Right.
Design will take some time.
No, it's good to know, because I think that I've been to these meetings and everyone's confused. Even people on the town council didn't have the answer to that, like when we talked off.
And it's under the control, since the grant isn't there, totally under control of the building committee. So therefore, the pressure of having steps, you have to go out, do this, this, and this. So if the building committee felt and their experts feel that it's better to hold off for a couple of weeks or months, they have the right to do that. We don't have to worry about losing a state grant at that point.
So that's the one plus.
Yep.
That's a big plus in this environment.
Yep, choose plus.
Did you drop the bomb at the meeting on the 6th? Or
I-
was that the...
Well,
town
I
council?
notified, obviously, the board of, the building committee first, which was the day after I met with the state.
Okay.
I met the state. The four of us met with the state, and then I notified the public at the council meeting.
Any more board communications?
Yes.
Ms. Zona?
And I'm not certain this was actually our board, but I was questioned by two different people. What's going on at the fire department on the main street, and where are the fire trucks while this is happening?
Well, that was part of our design maintenance. We're concerned about the entranceways to the fire department. In the entranceway. So not the building itself, but the area we come by, and then the trucks are in other stations. They're still in Southington, but they're in other stations. So most of them are at the station. I believe it's 3.
Can they get where they need to be quickly enough?
Hired, put the plan in place.
Tested that from there.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Public communications? Board communications? Now we'll go to public communications. Let it reflect that there is no one from the public. Well, we have one person from the public here, if she'd like to speak. She does not. So let the record reflect that there is nobody to speak at the public communications. I do want to ask for unanimous consent to do two things to the agenda: to move up manager memo 3, 4, and 5 up to the top of the order of everything, so that we could clear those large items first, and then to add an item that we're going to call number 6, which has to do with the Southington Fire Department requesting an appropriation for $9,000 for damage to a fire truck. We'll put that on the agenda.
Okay.
Any objection?
I'll make a motion. You got to have a motion to
I'll
do that.
second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. On behalf of Annette. So what we're going to do is we're going to take manager memos 3, 4, and 5, which have to do with the Emergency Management Fund and work in the parks. And those are the three, Annette, that you're of concern? So if you want to address us on those, and then we'll move right through and take action on them.
As Annette is walking up, these are obviously ARA money. As you are well aware, this board saw it many times, and one of the things we said as part of our policy, even though it's technically approved by this board and the town council, each time we do one of the projects, we bring it back through. So as you know, the chart that's putting in front of you right now, every time we go out to bid, the numbers aren't perfect. You know, when we estimate, they're not perfect. So what happens is that we redo this every time we go out to bid, because now we know what the fixed costs are going to be. So. And our Public Works Director is here to answer any of your questions and present the 3 items.
Okay. So the new chart is coming around. It's just been updated per the 3 items we'll talk about here. Anything in red is an actual cost that we have. Anything left in black is just the estimate. There's one that has both, but we'll get to that. So our first item is the Recreation Park Kiddie Playscape. As Mark mentioned, all these things were brought to you into the town council conceptually, and then we come back for appropriations once we have exact numbers and contractors. We had earmarked $125,000. We have a price of $124,995 for a new playscape for children between the ages of, I think it's 2 and 5. That's through O'Brien and Sons, and they are on the Connecticut state bid. This is ARPA money, so we have to be very careful that everything is either on a state bid or through Sourcewell, or we've gone out to bid. So in this case, O'Brien is on the state bid. Do you have any questions about that item? Okay. The next one is a little more complicated. These are improvements at Recreation Park. During the last iteration of this chart, I did have separate items, separate costs for a few items, which I've now lumped together. The memo lays them out. It's parking and drive improvements, drainage improvements near the football building, site work and drainage improvements near the concession building, improve the softball drainage and accessible routes to ball fields. Kind of made sense to lump those together because it overlaps. And basically we have three different vendors I'd like to use for this, Tilcon being one of them for all the paving. I have their quote. They're on the state bid. For concrete work, the town has a current contract with Valentine Construction, so I have their quote for the concrete work. And then similarly, we have a contract with River Valley for drainage improvements, so I would like to award all the drainage improvements to them. All the prices are in here for their quotes. The total, including a 10% contingency, is $677,428.77. And on the chart, you'll notice that's the one where I left a red number and a black number. And usually, if our actual price is different from what we had proposed, I'll reallocate that number somewhere else on this chart. But right now, since the project isn't completed, I'd like to just reserve the right to hang on to the rest of that money in case something else comes up, or if there's an issue or something else we need to get done. So that I haven't reallocated anywhere else. And then the final one is the big one. That one is for the Recreation Park pool. The pool needs some work. The pool itself, the mechanicals. We started talking about this a few years ago, and we had what we thought was a pretty good plan in place to basically build a pool within a pool because it took out the cost of a lot of the demo. But as we got further into it, with the prices of things today, the quote we got was well over what we had earmarked for the project. So we went back to the drawing board a bit. We did some value engineering. Mark loves that term. And with our pool experts, we came up with a better plan, what I think is a better plan. And this basically involves a commercial grade PVC lining rather than building a pool within the pool. It lasts 20 years, so essentially, it avoids the cracking. I think it's our best solution. It brought the price down closer to where we need to be. We're also eliminating any work to the kiddie pool, which we were going back and forth on that, but there's really nothing wrong with the kiddie pool. In speaking with residents, they like the kiddie pool. I'm sure you remember a few years ago, we converted the kiddie pool at Memorial to a splash pad, so we already have that in town. I don't really feel the need to have two of those. I know I've heard from residents that's great, but we like the pool too. So we're going to leave the kiddie pool alone. We'll update the mechanicals as necessary. We don't have too many difficulties with those, but we'll do what's necessary. So that price comes out to be, with a contingency, $1,306,511.90. We have enough allocated for that, but we're also doing the pool house, which I don't have final prices for. That I expect to be about $440,000. That's with a contingency, but we do have some flexibility within this chart, particularly the first row, the catch basin and pipe repair. I have other accounts that we use during normal years for that work, such as the widen resurface drainage account and Town Aid Road. We can also use contingency that we don't use from the other pump station projects. So I'm comfortable making those changes to the top row and bumping those down a little bit because I have other funds to cover those expenses if need be. And the only other thing that I did not mention is I would like to use the Easy IQC process and go with Millennium Builders for the pool work. In case you don't know, the Easy IQC program has various activities that go out to bid. They go out to bid every 2 years. The contracts are 2 years. They can extend it for a third year. And we are actually in that extension year. We're in the third year of the contract. So I think in this particular case, it's very beneficial for us to use this program through CROG because we're using prices that were set 3 years ago. I think if we went out to bid, we'd find that the cost is much higher.
So it's 1.746 million.
Yes.
And but the original, $5 million, right? So $200,000 difference. And you said you could make it up in other places, but that's quite a lot. That's a lot of.
It is. We had quite a lot in that first row for the catch basin repair. That's all the work we do associated with the road projects. All the drainage repairs we do ahead of time, and also any emergency catch basin repairs. And we do spend quite a bit on that every year, but we are used to spending that out of Town Aid Road and the drainage account. It's nice to have this ARPA money, to use first, but that's the easiest row to, yeah.
Okay,
The least effect on any future project.
Right.
Yeah, get it. Okay, thanks.
Sure.
A second question is an overall question. Apart from the last one, which you've explained why. Yep. The other two came in, pretty much under budget at a time when, materials, especially the parking drive improvements, which I'm sure used a lot of asphalt, must have been higher than your assumptions for it.
Well, we never really know till we get into it whether we're going to have to reclaim a road, because Maxwell Noble through the park is actually a town road, or if we can mill and pave. Fortunately, that pavement's in a condition where we can mill a lot of it rather than reclaiming. We are reclaiming a section because we want to regrade it for drainage purposes. So in the back by the Grove area, we'll be reclaiming, but a lot of it we're able to mill. But until we really take a hard look at it, we're never sure what process we're using.
Okay, so we were lucky. I don't know.
Sometimes you get lucky.
Thank you.
Most of the times we have to do more work to the road.
Yeah,
so
I know.
Any more comments?
I just want to make one comment. I've made it at the council meeting, and I know that I'll get calls anyway, but the fact of the matter is that moving forward with the recreation pool, the pool will not, and I repeat, will not be open next summer. So therefore, the pool will have open is going to be over, obviously over at Memorial. That pool will be open, will be operational, and that's where the citizens will be able to go. But I can't stress enough that this cannot be done in a short period of time. We need to have next building cycle, which includes the pool not being open for next summer. So I've said at the council meeting, just to make sure the public knows that. We're going to put that out, obviously, as we get closer to the springtime. We'll put the notices out on the in the emails. and on the website, but I can't stress enough that that pool will not be available to the public next summer.
On these three items together, items 3, 4, and 5, I'll read them. On appropriation, $124,995, Emergency Management Fund for the Rec Park Playscape. On appropriation for 677,429 for the Rec Park improvements that were discussed, and appropriation for $1,306,512 for the Rec Park Pool House, all funded through the ARPA, American
moved.
Recovery,
I'll second it.
ARPA is how we use it.
yeah, ARPA.
Yes, so moved.
Motion by Mrs. Oni, second by Mr. Pocock. Discussion? The only piece of discussion I have, and it's not a criticism, it's just the amount. When I look at a playscape for children, $125,000, seems like a lot of money for a playscape, but I have to
seems
sit back
like
and
it.
say it is what it is.
However, the Rotary one at Panthorn was 250.
Right.
And then a pool, it would have to probably come in as the most expensive pool in town at $1.3 million.
Gets a lot of use.
And we already
It's a big
have a
pool.
pool there. So again, it's another thing where I don't really know what to say. I feel compelled to say something, but I don't really have the power to fix it all. But $1.3 million for the pool seems like a lot of money. But a 20-year life, if people watching or looking at the meeting would say, boy, for $100,000, I can put quite the pool in my backyard, and for $400,000, I could have an oasis, and then we'll go for $1.3 million. I mentioned it before, but I don't have any, the experience or the knowledge to know better, but it's a lot of money.
Annette, what was the life of the current pool? How long's that been?
It's been well over 20 years. I don't know the exact date, but the pool that's there has some structural
Right,
issues.
it needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
We need to do something. I mean, I think,
Yeah.
our pool expert coming up with this liner idea, I think, was brilliant because it gets us the lifetime and saves us quite a bit of money. But it also, you're replacing the mechanicals, and it's going to be a different system than we have now. But I know, my pool at home, we have the cartridge system. You have one cartridge. This pool has 6. So it's much more sophisticated than what you're putting in your backyard. So
Jim, you just mentioned Wallingford put up a pool for,
No, when as I left there, they were at around $7 million, and the mayor sort of put the kibosh on it for the time being, much to
was that for
put
a new
some
pool?
price into
some folks.
reality.
It's to replace a current pool, which is and I've forgotten. I'm trying to search my memory banks for the square footage. I don't remember. It's a huge pool, and it's way too big and inefficient, I should say. And build a smaller pool, splash pad, almost like I'll use the phrase kiddie pool, and of course with mobility. Some children having mobility issues, having a little bit of an easier way to get into that and whatnot, and a smaller pool. So the footprint is going to be expanded, but it's not going to be all pool, if you will. So, and they were at around $7 million or something like that. So, and it's becoming it's a political thing now. So
No,
I don't.
but that just gives us a little reality on the cost of putting a pool in.
Yeah, yeah.
I like to look at $65,000 a year for 20 years. If you want to look at it that way.
And how
Is
much use it gets, too.
Exactly.
It
So
does
that's
get a
what-
lot of use.
I try and look at things that way,
Yeah.
and I know that that's rosy, but the fact of the matter is it's $65,000 to operate a municipal pool, or not operate, but to have a municipal pool for 20 years. So that's the way I look at it.
I will say, too, when you use the Easy IQC process, most of the time you don't really use the contingency, or most of it anyway. And in this case, because it's so expensive, it's almost $160,000 that I'm hopeful we won't have to use. So that could be reallocated to something else, or put towards the pool house, which we still have to do.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Oh,
I'll take a voice vote. for
Vo-
this.
Roll call vote on this, Mr. Bose. All those in favor, let's go one by one.
Okay. Ms. Zoni,
Yes.
Mr. Morrison,
Yes.
Mr. Bodwin,
Yes.
Mr. Pocock Jr.,
Yes.
Mr. Lebeniak, absent.
Absent.
Chairman Larry.
Yes. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Annette, for
Thank you.
representing this.
Thank you for moving it up, too.
Thank you.
Okay, while we're here, let's take the other item we moved up from the fire department, then we'll go back down the list. So what we moved from the fire department was, I'll just read it because we all just got it. The Southington Fire Chief requests an appropriation rate to special revenue vehicle maintenance loss damage. The appropriation for $9,667 and 36 cents, and we request it be allocated to special revenue account. The town received a check from Kerma in the same amount. The funds will be used to cover the cost of repairs of a 2019 Stephan Monarch fire engine that was damaged in an accident.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, number 6 carries 5-0. And now we'll take the consent agenda. A lot of items in here. I'll read them fast and we'll take them, hopefully make up for it by one vote. There are many items. The consent agenda is similar to this fire truck where we receive funds and all we're doing is putting them back to the line in which we need to put them back to in order to appropriate them for their intended purpose. So, first one, appropriation $5,000, emergency management temporary seasonal for the absentee ballot grant. $7,984, emergency management program supplies for the absentee ballot grant. Appropriation $4,790, town clerk program services, a nominee fee. Appropriation $7,500, town clerk program services document preservation grant. Appropriation $1,000, town council program services white Christmas. Appropriation $2,500, capital budget rails to trails donations. Appropriation $8,000 even, youth services drug-free communities grant overtime. Appropriation $2,102, youth services drug-free community grant FICA and Medicare and MERS. Appropriation $12,726, fire department extra duty pay. Appropriation $1,200, library program services Connecticut Summer at the Museum grant. Appropriation $25,000, police department equipment, JAG PVET grant. Appropriation $786, police department vehicle maintenance loss damage. Appropriation from fiscal year 22, $2,965, youth services drug-free communities overtime, and appropriation from fiscal year 22, $743, youth services drug-free communities grant for FICA, Medicare, and MERS. Appropriation $4,850 for sewer fund sewer maintenance, loss damage repair. And the last one, appropriation for $528,109 from the capital fund for town aid for roads.
I'll make a motion to approve these appropriations as read for all of these.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on them? And again, these are transfers of money already received that's already been vetted by the people who sent it in. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The whole consent agenda carries 5-0. Thank you. The next one, we have 2 manager memos. One is in 4 parts and then one separate one. So manager memo number 1, they're pulled out of the consent agenda because Mr. Pocock works at the Calendar House, so we take it separately, and he tends to abstain from any vote where he may be involved in any way. He's done that forever. So number 1 is an appropriation in 4 parts. $12,000 Calendar House for overtime, $14,699 Calendar House for temporary seasonal, appropriation for $16,000 Calendar House for gasoline, and appropriation $12,000 for Calendar House for vehicle maintenance. We have a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the manager's memos, appropriations, just for.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Let's do a roll call vote, please.
Ms. Zoni,
Yes.
Mr. Morrison,
Yes.
Mr. Bodwin,
Yes.
Mr. Pocock Jr.,
Abstain.
Mr. Labiniak, Absent. And Mr. Chairman Leary.
Yes. So motion carries four yes, one abstention. Number 2 is an appropriation for $79,310 to the capital fund for townwide vehicle replacement.
So
This is
moved.
for, I'm sorry, this is for a calendar house bus.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second for the calendar house bus. We'll take a roll call vote on that as well.
Ms. Zoni,
Yes.
Mr. Morrison,
Yes.
Mr. Bodwin,
Yes.
Mr. Pocock Jr.,
Abstain.
Mr. Labiniak is not here, and Chairman Leary.
Yes. Motion carries 4 yes, 1 abstention. Okay, discussion on the action of the Board of Ed non-lapsing account for the 2022 year.
Mr. Chairman, if I just take a minute to explain for the public. The Board of Education is entitled to ask the Board of Finance to do a carryover fund each fiscal year for an amount not to exceed 2% of their budget. We've done this now for, I believe, 4 or 5 years. This particular case, the Board of Education goes through their budget and sees what monies they wish for carryover. We've already granted, quote-unquote, a carryover account back in our meeting, I believe in June. This is the money that they're asking me to put into it, and then sometime subsequent to this, they'll come into you with what expenses they wish to take off of that. Obviously, one of the expenses, which is for the 27th week. The rest forthcoming. When I say the 27th week, and the rest of it will come forthcoming on what kind of expenses they wish to do. So,
Is a question?
would be whatever's remaining from, I believe they used up the 19, and so this would be the 2021 and now 22.
Right, so there's 2. If they're going to come back with expenditures for this, I think it might not be appropriate between at least now and the budget season. I think we're going to use every single proposal. Because issues we talked about earlier. If the schools decide to spend, a certain amount of money on things that 6 months later they may regard as somewhat frivolous, I would like to see them, obviously we force them to do that instead. Hold back at least until next February or March, which as they have. So just as a comment.
Any further discussion on the item? Yeah, I think holding the 2%, I believe, is a, or at least the policy or the statute that allowed them to hold the 2% is good, because it gives them the ability to be proactive and not use it or lose it. Had been the case prior to that. They would have to spend it, and we would hear, stories of how they spent it, whether they had encumbrances or whether they purchased supplies in advance, and sometimes didn't even have places to put them, because they said, I've got a point, I'll buy these supplies and I won't need them in the future. It's just a timing thing. It's nothing inappropriate. But we've forced a big timing issue on when we buy stuff. And I think allowing them to carry the 2% gives them some managerial flexibility to say, hey, next year they will face high inflation. They will face costs going up. Their energy is as uncertain as ours as to what the price will be with things that are not locked in. So they could hold back some if, where they can, and then they could release it. The question that we're going to have to ask ourselves, more from a policy and procedure standpoint, when they hold back unspent funds, they actually drive a surplus. That surplus finds its way into the rainy day fund, which is the undesignated general fund balance. Our rules around the undesignated general fund balance say that it could only be used for really like capital expenditures or one-time opportunities, or to pay down debt. Those are generally the reasons, not to go in the rainy day fund itself, but in the excess. We usually limit that to capital we limit it to some one-time, usually that's a capital item, or to pay down debt. And the Board of Ed does not pay down debt. The general government side does that for them. So I'd like us to just keep in mind, not take any action on it, but keep in mind that our rules make this 2% interesting, because we give it to them, we give them the appropriation to spend, let's say roughly $100 million, which is the Board of Ed budget. They go off and they do things, and they're able to spend only $98 million. They want to hold 2%, $2 million. They force it back to us in a surplus through the accounting. That's how it comes back. We get a surplus of $2 million. Then we say in the future, it can only be used for capital. But we gave it for operations. They withheld it from operations, and only by the virtue that it comes back into the general fund, into the undesignated fund balance, which is what we call the rainy day fund, our rules say it could only then be used coming out for capital. And that works when it's a small amount because they have capital needs. But if they don't have capital needs at the 2% level of their budget, we have to think about what can we let them use it for. And this whole conversation is not for the rainy day fund itself, it's the excess above our policy floor of like 11% now. So
Yeah, but
that's a question.
I mean, there's what rules you have when it's, business as usual. And then there's what you have to do when there may be some serious trouble, which next year may well be so. So if you look at the state legislation for the non-lapsing account, says you can spend it on actually anything that's education-based. Spend it on operations, you can spend it on capital, you can spend it on pretty much anything you wanted, as long as there was an educational tie-in to it. But that's the only legal restriction per se. Otherwise, it's restrictions that we would, for obvious reasons of good finance, to usual. I just worry about next year not being one of those years. And, for me, if someone had $2.5 million in an account that they could spend for anything education, it might be worthwhile spending on, say, operational money instead of asking for an increase if we were in trouble, from a taxpayer perspective.
Yeah, it's our policy.
Remember, we already voted on, this you haven't allocated yet. When you take your vote, you're going to do the numbers here, but the other ones are actually allocated toward a list of things. So that's not to say you can't do it.
Yeah.
You can do it if you feel it's possible, yeah.
We may, and all I'm saying is I think Tony's saying the same thing. We may want to understand it, chat about it up front, or at least have it in our heads, and we may want to amend our own guidance, given the situation and given that the state raised it up to 2%, which is a huge number, versus before when it was a minuscule number.
1%.
Yeah, it's a much bigger number when you're talking about 2% of 100 million, or excess of 100 million.
I would stress this is only a situational comment.
Yeah.
This isn't a...
Yeah. I mean, this ends up, the timing on it, to Mr. Morrison's point, has to be pretty much now or in the very near future, because this portion is not in the undesignated fund balance in the 630 audit. It's part of the designated, we call them carry forwards. Most communities do. It's carry forward money. So it's a different, like Chairman Larry was saying, it is a different designation of the fund balance. So it's an amount that's not included, if you will, in the, I'll call it the free usable fund balance, if you will, subject to appropriation by this body and the council. So, and the fact that they put together a list of stuff that's more capital oriented is good, but very good. But I know there are boards of education out there who have legal opinions with regards to saying that the city and or the municipal government cannot tell them how to spend carry forward monies. So so if the board, and I'm not advocating for them, Tony, please don't misunderstand me.
It's a point of discussion.
I like the way this, because I read about this in the paper a while ago and talked to Sherry. Sherry Denell will work for me as well. So when they come forward and say we have this list of projects, they're smaller. I mean, sometimes bathroom repairs and stall repairs and things of that, lockers and things of that nature. Those are very, very positive ways to use monies. And frankly, like I said, I'm not a legal beagle, so I'm not going to go there. But when a couple of Board of Ed business managers that I know throughout the state tell me they've got a white paper out there with a legal opinion that says the town can't restrict the way we use the money when they give it to us at the beginning of the fiscal year or during the budget process. There's nothing in there that says you
We
can.
discussed that in the beginning.
Yeah.
and the-
Yeah, I know
and
we
the-
did,
The
yeah.
power of the Board of Finance is pretty simple.
Yep.
If it's not being used the way the Board of Finance and Town Council.
You're
do,
not gonna
you
get
don't
it.
carry over the money.
You're not gonna
So
get
it's-
it,
It's
yeah.
very easy. There's
So you guys-
carrot and a
And,
stick for that.
and the thing we don't want to do is drive the wrong behavior. By saying it could only be used
Yep.
for capital, somebody in finance on the Board of Ed side will say, we don't have that much capital, we better use it or lose it now.
Correct.
And that's the behavior
Yep.
none of us want.
Yeah.
So, we don't want to set policy or guidance that causes a behavior, collateral damage,
Yeah.
a behavior we don't want. So it's just something to think about.
And you don't have to approve all 2%. I mean, you can, I believe the statute, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong,
Well, you're
says
not.
up
Tonight-
to,
Yeah.
Tonight
up
you're
to
only-
2%.
Tonight, you're only appropriating just shy of $500,000.
Correct,
So
yeah.
nowhere near the 2%.
I'm just saying, I've run into situations where, the 1% and then the 2% were, basically given carte blanche, and then folks started to talk about it because the amount started to accumulate quite a bit. Not here, but it became to the point where in the fiscal year that ended last year, I believe, they came before the council in this municipality, and the council turned them down unanimously, which is kind of because they had like $4 or $5 million in that thing, and I wasn't there. I was gone.
Gotta be careful what we do. But thank you for the wisdom on that. Let's take an action on the Board of Education non-lapsing account.
May I recommend a motion, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, could you read the motion?
Yeah, the motion would be that you're authorizing $495,848 in the carry request from the 21-22, and you understand that the Board of Education is using approximately $238,986.
In a second, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Oh no, would you like a voice vote? I'm sorry, I was taking notes.
No,
I
you
will.
can do all in
I
favor.
would gladly do a roll call.
No,
vote.
we'll do a voice. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I don't want to hear myself vote for aye. That has always been
Yeah, that's
could never understand it, but I get it.
14 years from now, Mr. Chairman, we'll deal with it again.
Less than that, right, doesn't it?
Every 14 years.
Sinking fund?
For the biweekly.
For the whole thing, but not for the day. The day comes up every 3 years or something, right?
We have
No.
to
We
worry
used to
about
build a
that.
sinking fund for that. We should talk about that.
Well, that's when we were paid every week. Now we're paid biweekly, so it comes up every 14 years. The number's large. From the
Yeah.
town side, as you remember, the number was a lot larger than $200-something thousand.
Yeah, oh, I know. Okay,
Move to adjourn?
yeah, we have our favorite motion. We have a motion to adjourn. Any second?
I'll second.
Motion to adjourn, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Adjourn at 8:15.
I do have something funny for us, though. When we were